The headline hit like a slap across the face of the internet. Evan Mitchell dies in fiery car crash. Photos flooded social media. Candles, quotes, pixelated snapshots from his childhood. Comment sections filled with sorrow and disbelief. Friends, colleagues, former classmates, they all shared memories like he was some cautionary tale of brilliance gone too soon. But here's the twist no one saw coming. He wasn't dead, not even close. He was sitting in a dim motel room, lights off, laptop open, staring at the news coverage of his own death. The footage showed smoldering wreckage, a twisted metal frame they claimed was his. Coroner's report confirmed cause of death, blunt trauma, and fire. All fake. They made sure it looked real. His family, that is. The people who were supposed to protect him. They'd pulled every string to stage it perfectly. Even grief looked convincing on them. His father giving a eulogy with crocodile tears. His mother clutching a folded photo to her chest like her heart had shattered. But he knew better. Because he remembered the conversation that led to this. The quiet threat behind closed doors. The way they spoke of him like a liability, like a problem to be solved. He refused to play their game, and this was their move. Erase him, make the world forget. And in a twisted way, they almost did. But what they didn't realize was that ghosts don't stay buried forever. Sometimes they watch, and sometimes they come back, not to haunt, to rebuild, to rewrite, to undo everything they tried to bury. They didn't just fake his death for shock value. They did it because he was inconvenient. Behind the polished smiles and designer suits, his family ran an empire built on quiet corruption. Shell companies, political favors, offshore accounts that never showed up in audits. To the public, they were philanthropists, visionaries, the kind of people who hosted black tie galas and got invited to speak on ethical leadership. But behind closed doors, they played a different game. And Evan, he was the glitch in their perfect narrative. The son who asked too many questions. The one who actually read the footnotes in the quarterly reports. The only heir who didn't want to inherit blood money and turn a blind eye just to keep the lights on in a mansion he didn't believe in. When he started digging deeper, connecting names, dates, numbers, they noticed. And when he confronted them, they didn't raise their voices. They didn't argue. They smiled. And then they made him disappear. The plan was simple. A late-night drive, a sudden accident, and a staged crash so violent no one would question the lack of a body. Add a closed casket funeral, a generous donation to the responding fire department, and the world moved on. Except he didn't. And the part that haunted him most, his mother, the way she avoided his eyes the last time they spoke. The way she said, "Sometimes silence is love, Evan," as if that made sense, as if betrayal could ever feel like care. He hadn't died that night, but something in him had, something soft, something trusting. It took years and to build that kind of loyalty, and just seconds to shatter it. And now, as he watched old family photos resurface in tribute posts and headlines framed in pity, one thought burned in his chest like acid. They didn't just erase a son, they erased a threat. But he was still here. And one day soon, they'd see just how much damage a dead man could do. The night he left, there was no dramatic goodbye. No rain-soaked airport chase. No suitcase full of cash. Just a cheap backpack, a burner phone, and a one-way bus ticket with no name attached. He didn't run. He slipped away. Quiet, deliberate, like a ghost, learning how to walk through walls. Because when the world thinks you're dead, the only power you have left is the choice to stay gone. So he did. He crossed 3 state lines in 2 days, used cash for everything, avoided cameras, turned off his old life like flipping a light switch. No social media, no emails, no trace. The boy who once walked red carpets and sat front row at charity galas. Gone. Just another nameless stranger in the background of crowded bus terminals and rundown motels. The first few weeks were disorienting. He wasn't grieving exactly. He was unraveling. Every time he passed a mirror, he saw someone else. Someone thinner, quieter, older somehow. Trauma ages you in invisible ways. But somewhere in the numbness, a thought began to form. If they went through all that trouble to erase him, then maybe the best revenge wasn't returning as a son. Maybe it was returning as something more. So he started from scratch, moved into a cramped basement unit in a forgettable part of town, took temp jobs, observed, studied, learned the systems the world ran on: code, contracts, compliance, no longer just reacting to the damage they caused. He was preparing for something bigger. He didn't know exactly what yet. All he knew was this: he wouldn't rebuild the life they stole. He'd build something they couldn't touch, something they couldn't even see coming. And when it rose, quiet, strategic, unstoppable, he wouldn't need the family name. He'd erase theirs instead. It didn't look like success, not at first. There were no glass offices, no investor pitches, no startup launch parties with free cocktails and TED Talk energy. Just a cramped sublet with peeling paint, a secondhand laptop, and the relentless hum of a box fan that couldn't quite drown out the city outside. But in that tiny space, something real was forming. He woke up every day before the sun rose, sometimes not having slept at all, driven by something bigger than revenge. Resolve. It was no longer about proving them wrong. It was about proving he never needed them to begin with. He taught himself everything: front end, back end, security systems, contract law, slept with textbooks under his pillow, absorbed every free coding course he could find, watched YouTube videos on finance until his eyes blurred. Weeks turned into months, and still, no one knew his name. And that was exactly the point. He wasn't building a company. He was building a shield. Something clean, powerful, incorruptible. A compliance AI engine, disguised as just another B2B product. But underneath, it was different. It didn't just flag risk. It learned from it, predicted it, caught the kind of financial manipulation his family used to hide behind, before the regulators even knew what to look for. No one wanted to invest at first. Why would they? A no-name founder with no pedigree and no pitch deck. But one small firm gave him a shot. Quietly, off the record, said they were curious. And when the beta launched, it worked. Within weeks, the little product that no one believed in started circulating in niche corners of the industry. Compliance officers whispered about it. Legal teams requested demos. Not because it was flashy, but because it was brilliant. For the first time in his life, he didn't need his last name to be seen. And the best part? No one, not a single soul, knew where it came from. Not yet. But soon the world would realize that something powerful had risen from the ashes. And this time, it wouldn't carry their legacy. It would erase it. The whispers came first. Small things. A key investor pulling out at the last second. No explanation, no phone call, just silence. A meeting canceled 5 minutes before it started. A journalist who'd promised coverage suddenly ghosting the story. At first, it felt like bad luck. Startup turbulence, nothing more. But then the patterns emerged. Someone had been working behind the scenes. Quietly, surgically, influencing boardrooms, leaning on regulators, feeding poison into conversations he wasn't invited to. He could feel it, like cold fingers tightening around his momentum. The product was sound, the interest was real. But trust? Trust evaporates fast when someone's whispering lies in the right ears. One by one, potential partnerships crumbled. A leaked tip suggested the technology was stolen. There was no source, no lawsuit, just enough noise to create doubt. Another rumor claimed he was unstable, operating under a fake identity, which, in a twisted way, wasn't entirely false. But the point wasn't the truth. It was perception. And that's when it hit him. This wasn't the market. This wasn't misfortune. This was them. The same family that had orchestrated his death was now trying to bury his future. Not with fire and twisted metal this time, but with reputational rot. And the worst part? They were good at it. They'd done this before, to competitors, to ex-partners, even to their own blood. But what they didn't understand, what they'd never understand, was that he wasn't the same boy they silenced. They thought they were cutting off his air supply, but all they'd done was teach him to hold his breath longer than anyone else in the room. And while they played their game from the shadows, he began preparing in silence, not to fight back directly, not yet, but to dig deeper, to watch, to learn every single crack in their empire. Because this time, he wouldn't just survive the sabotage. He'd make them regret ever thinking he could be erased twice. It started with a name, buried inside a PDF, an old vendor ledger, the kind most people would ignore. A name he hadn't heard in years. A dummy corporation his father used to funnel hush money during a past scandal. It was small, easy to overlook, but he didn't. That was the crack in the dam. From there, the unraveling began. Late nights turned into early mornings as he sat hunched over files, spreadsheets, encrypted emails he wasn't supposed to have. Data points became patterns. Patterns became proof. The fake death wasn't just a cover-up. It was a transaction. A maneuver designed to protect the family's financial core when everything around them was rotting from the inside. Turns out, around the time the world thought he died, the family was facing exposure, an internal leak threatening to reveal decades of embezzlement, illicit investments, even bribery charges that could have taken the entire empire down. And the solution? Eliminate the one person with enough curiosity and conscience to follow the trail. His accident had allowed them to claim a large life insurance payout through an offshore policy, one that had been set up under the guise of asset protection months earlier. The payout, nearly identical to the debt they were quietly trying to erase. He hadn't been just disowned. He had been liquidated, and the paper trail didn't stop there. Fake trusts, stolen patents, stock holdings moved under shell companies, in his name, as if he had never died, as if he'd just become another financial instrument for them to manipulate. But then came the twist that shattered him. One signature, scribbled at the bottom of a high-risk loan forgiveness agreement. Her name, not his father's. Heron, the woman who used to hum lullabies when he had night terrors, the one who whispered, "Don't worry, I've got you," when he panicked before his first school presentation. Her name was on the document that finalized his erasure. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a choice. She had chosen silence over him. He stared at the screen until the words blurred. Not from fatigue, but from something far heavier. The realization that the last tether he held to home, to comfort, to love, it was gone. She hadn't just let them destroy him. She'd helped write the script. And in that moment, grief turned into something colder, sharpened. Not revenge, not yet, but clarity. And clarity is lethal. The moment he knew the truth, something in him changed. There was no breakdown, no angry outburst, just a stillness, a silence so deep it felt like the air itself was waiting. And then he got to work. Not with rage, but with precision. He knew how they operated, because once upon a time, they taught him. The family business didn't run on innovation or passion. It ran on control, on keeping secrets sealed and appearances polished. But they never expected the thing they tried to bury would become the one person who knew where every skeleton was hidden. He started small. Quiet leaks to regulatory agencies, encrypted tips to financial journalists, a slow drip of truth, masked in anonymity, until the media couldn't ignore it anymore. And when the first article broke, prominent financial dynasty under investigation for tax fraud and identity laundering. He watched the news like someone flipping through old photo albums. It didn't feel real, but it was. Board members resigned. Stockholders panicked. Political allies pulled away. The empire shook. But here's the thing they never understood about him. He didn't want to take over their world. He wanted to dismantle it. Every rigged contract, every loophole, every carefully stacked domino. He'd spent so long wondering if he'd ever belong. And now, he didn't want in. He wanted out. He infiltrated their back-end systems through legal means. Records they'd forgotten, misfiled, or dismissed. He knew just where to look. The holdings they'd buried offshore? Exposed. The shell companies in his name? Frozen. And the death benefit they'd cashed in? Contested. Publicly. It was surgical. Brutal. Effective. And still, something inside him felt hollow. Because the headlines didn't heal betrayal. Watching his father lie on TV didn't undo the night he disappeared. Seeing their empire collapse didn't fix the way his mother's name still echoed in his mind. He had control now, sure, but power without peace is just another kind of prison. And in the stillness of his victory, he felt it creep in, the question that kept him awake at night. If I've destroyed the thing that broke me, why do I still feel broken? The answer wasn't revenge. It wasn't legacy. It was truth. And the most painful truth of all? He wasn't fighting them anymore. He was fighting the version of himself they'd left behind. He always thought she would be different. His father was calculated. His brother? Jealous, cruel in that quiet, rehearsed way. But her, she was supposed to be the soft place he could land, the one voice that didn't echo with expectations or threats. She used to braid his hair when he was little, made tea when he had nightmares, whispered stories about courage and kindness, and how no matter how dark it got, she'd always be there. But now, her voice was on the other end of a secure line, and it didn't sound like love. "You need to stop this," she said, calm, like this was a negotiation, not a reckoning. "You're tearing the family apart." A beat of silence. He didn't respond, couldn't. He was too busy trying to make sense of the words she chose. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I was scared." Just, "Stop." She continued. "You don't know what it was like. We were losing everything. Your father, he had no choice. None of us did. And that's when it snapped." I was your son, he said quietly. Not a liability, not a balance sheet entry. I trusted you. There was a pause, longer this time, a breath, the kind you take when you're about to say something final. I protected you the only way I knew how, she whispered, by making sure you didn't become part of it. But it was too late. That justification, that twisted logic, it didn't undo the signatures. It didn't erase the insurance payout or the shell companies in his name. It didn't bring back the boy who once thought his mother would fight the world for him, not with it. She had betrayed him. But worse than that, she had rationalized it. He hung up before she could say anything else. Not out of anger, out of survival. Because hearing her voice didn't just bring pain, it brought doubt. And that doubt, that's how they won. That's how they always won. But not this time. That call was the last thread. And when it snapped, it didn't leave him empty. It left him free. Because once you stop needing the people who destroyed you to explain why, you finally make space to become someone they never could control. It didn't happen with a bang. No dramatic takedown. No screaming match on national television. Just silence. The kind that comes after a bomb has gone off and the dust hasn't settled yet. The kind that makes your ears ring, even when everything looks still on the surface. It started with a single press release from a government agency. Cold, clinical, factual. Preliminary findings into corporate misconduct under review. Multiple entities frozen pending investigation. One paragraph, no names, but everyone in the industry knew. That silence didn't stay quiet for long. By week's end, media outlets dug up everything. The shell companies, the tax evasion, the offshore accounts. They even found the life insurance policy and began asking the unthinkable question. Was the heir to one of America's wealthiest families faked dead for profit? The internet lit up. Talk shows speculated. Conspiracy theorists had a field day. And behind closed doors, the empire cracked. Banks pulled out. Partners severed ties. Government contracts vanished overnight. The family's billion-dollar legacy, once untouchable, began to rot in the daylight. His father tried to fight back, hired PR firms, sent out legal threats, gave one final interview insisting it was all a misunderstanding. But his eyes, once sharp, commanding, looked tired, empty, like the realization had finally hit. The thing they were most afraid of wasn't public shame. It was losing the illusion of control. And that illusion was gone. The brother vanished, fled the country, some said. The board dissolved, lawsuits stacked up, and as everything fell apart, no one seemed to notice one quiet figure walking away from it all. Not triumphant, not gloating, just finished. He didn't need a courtroom verdict. He didn't need an apology. The truth had been unburied, and that was enough. But what he didn't expect, what blindsided him more than any betrayal, was how hollow it all felt. He had won. Technically. The machine was broken. The people who tried to erase him were drowning in the wreckage of their own lies. And yet, standing alone in a quiet office, watching the news roll across a flickering screen, he felt no peace. Because revenge might satisfy the world, but it doesn't stitch the holes in your soul. Still, he didn't regret it, not a second of it. Because now he wasn't a ghost. He wasn't their legacy. He was something entirely new, rebuilt from ruin, unclaimed by blood, free from the chains of name and obligation. They tried to bury him, but they planted something instead. And now? Now he was finally ready to grow, on his own terms. The empire had crumbled, headlines faded, courtrooms emptied. The noise that once surrounded everything, the panic, the whispers, the public outrage, had finally gone quiet. And in that quiet, he sat alone, not in some penthouse overlooking the city, not in a revenge-fueled bunker with screens showing every person he'd taken down, just a modest office. Second floor, hardwood floor scuffed by time, a half-full mug of coffee gone cold beside a flickering desk lamp. This was what victory looked like. Not grand, not glamorous, just space, time, breath. He could have built another empire right then, bought a new name, raised a golden monument on the ashes of the old world. People would have backed him now. Doors that once slammed shut were wide open, but he didn't want to walk through them anymore, because he'd learned something in the fire. Power without peace is just another cage. So instead, he started smaller, a foundation, not a company. Not about status or scale, but about rebuilding from what was real. He began hiring people with stories like his, those cut out, cast aside, told they were too much or too little for the world to hold. Engineers, whistleblowers, kids with fire and no outlet. He gave them space, gave them trust, something he knew the value of now more than ever. And as they worked, something unexpected happened. He began to heal. Not all at once. Healing doesn't work that way. Some wounds never fully close. But bit by bit, he remembered what it felt like to build without bitterness, to lead without fear, to create without trying to prove anything to anyone. He didn't rebuild to replace what was lost. He rebuilt because he finally understood. You don't need a name to matter. You just need something real to believe in. And now, he was building exactly that. People talk about survival like it's the end of the story. Like once you've made it through the fire, the credits roll and the music swells. But no one talks about what comes after. The silence, the stillness, the kind of loneliness that doesn't scream. It whispers. At night, when the noise fades and you're left alone with your thoughts, your choices, your scars. He had won. On paper, he was untouchable. The family that tried to erase him was buried under the weight of their own lies. The business he built was thriving, built from truth, not illusion. But something was missing. Not fame, not fortune, connection. He didn't trust easily anymore. How could he? When your own blood signs off your disappearance, shaking someone's hand doesn't carry the same comfort it used to. He went on dates, tried to laugh, tried to believe people meant what they said. But in the back of his mind, there was always a voice. Quiet, sharp. What do they really want from you? So, he stayed guarded, polite, kind even, but distant. And the farther he got from the wreckage of his old life, the more he realized something brutal. Winning changes you. But surviving, that breaks you. You lose the softness, the innocence, the part of you that believed people could love without conditions. He walked through his office late one evening. Empty desks, soft hum of machines still running. He paused by the window, watching the city below. All the lights, the movement, the lives happening without him. He had built something great, something good. But sometimes, even in the glow of that new beginning, he missed the feeling of being someone's son, someone's person. And in that moment, it hit him. He hadn't just been fighting to be remembered. He'd been fighting to feel real again. When you lose everything you thought defined you, you start to ask different questions. Not, what can I build, but what's worth building? He didn't want another empire, empires crumble. He didn't want legacy. Legacies get stolen, rewritten, whitewashed into something unrecognizable. What he wanted now was substance, something that couldn't be bought or buried or faked. So he started again, quietly, not with capital and consultants, but with people, survivors, dreamers, the ones who'd been cast out, silenced, discredited by systems that only served the loudest and the richest. He rented a small building, nothing fancy. The paint was chipped, the carpet old, but it had light, windows that let the sun in, and that felt like a good place to begin. He called it a collective, not a company, because it wasn't about hierarchy. It was about healing. Innovation without ego. Structure without control. The first few hires were unconventional. A cybersecurity dropout with a record, a single mom who taught herself AI between nursing shifts, a whistleblower who'd lost her pension for doing the right thing. They didn't ask for titles. They asked for purpose. And he gave it to them. Together, they built systems that protected the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. Tools that flagged corruption in real time. Contracts with transparency baked into the code. He never put his name on anything. No press, no interviews. The world didn't need to know who was behind it. Because, for the first time, it wasn't about being seen. It was about making space. He wasn't trying to replace what was lost anymore. He was planting something new, something that might outlive him, not because it carried his blood or his name, but because it was built on something stronger than legacy. It was built on truth, and truth, once rooted deep enough, doesn't need to scream to be heard. It just grows. There's a moment, after the dust settles, after the pain dulls, where you realize you're still here, maybe not as whole as before, maybe not as trusting, but still here, still breathing, still becoming. They tried to write him out of the story. They buried him in paperwork and silence. They put a price tag on his life and called it a solution. But he turned the erasure into a blueprint, the silence into strategy, and the grief into growth. Because when the world forgets you, when your own blood pretends you never existed, it carves something inside you that no lie can reach. A fire, a clarity, a refusal to disappear. And if you're watching this, maybe you know that feeling too. Maybe you've been pushed out, talked over, defined by someone else's version of your worth. And maybe no one ever apologized for it. But here's the thing they don't tell you. You don't need their permission to begin again. You don't need a name, a title, or a legacy to matter. You don't even need to be seen by the people who left you behind. You just need one thing. You. Fully. Quietly. Unapologetically. You. Because the story isn't over when they stop telling it. It's over when you stop writing it. And you haven't. So if this hit you somewhere deep, if this felt like a mirror instead of a movie, leave a comment. Share your piece of the story. Let others know they're not alone. And if you're building something from the ashes like he did, or like you will, hit that like button. Subscribe. Stay. Because we're not done telling stories for the forgotten. We're just getting started.